Can you hear it? Can you hear the call? It's the sound of the waters parting with an outstretched arm of redemption. It's the sound of worlds colliding like galaxies in the universe. It's the sound of the recollection of forgotten souls. The sound of his kingdom being shaped from the dusk. The sound of restoration amongst broken hearts. And the sound of a chorus between meager verses. It's in the reverberations of every tongue and every tribe, from sea to shining sea. Can you hear it? Here and now. The support received through the Annie Armstrong Easter offering is used to empower and equip missionaries in North America. Will you join together with us? Because there is much work to be done. Here and now.
I started in New York City in the late 70s. People sometimes need to see the gospel before they can hear it. When we first got here, there were so many immediate needs, and we started there. And so that was part of what we said. We said, meet the need first. It's not the only way, but it's one of the ways to reach out to others.
I was homeless, and I was hanging out in the park, and I just became a chest foot addict.
I met this guy, and I said, what's your name? And he said, Chess Monster. And it wasn't until later that I learned his name was Lewis Taylor, but he wanted to become Chess Monster.
I noticed when I started feeding people in the park, and there were no strings attached. He fed everybody first, and if you wanted to stay, you could stay. If you didn't want to stay, you could go. So that really impressed me at first, listen to your own spirit.
Chess to me helps epitomize some of the principles that we're learning about meet the need first. It's not meet the need. It's not just do something, it's meet the need first, because that opens the way for so much else. The Annie Armstrong Easter offering, it helps in so many different ways. Like someone who's hungry gets food, or someone who doesn't have clothing that gets clothing, or someone who's having an addiction problem gets recovery help. But it helps them learn that Christ is transforming. And so I would ask for prayer for people like Chess Monster as God continues to transform them. Once that happens, things get out of hand. We'll lose count. And that's our prayer.
I grew up with a stuttering problem, so speaking in front of people always makes me very nervous. And I was sitting in my parents' barber shop. It was a little museum in honor of my great-grandfather. He felt the calling on his life to plant a church in Detroit in the 40s. The reason why his church grew is because he had a way with people. And I'm looking at the pictures of my papa's church, And then he just hit me with this small, still voice. If I can use your papa, then I can use you. We need so many more home churches for people in Detroit. And for those of you that have been giving, or maybe will give for the first time to the Annie Armstrong Easter offering, I mean, you literally are making an impact all the way up in Detroit, in the Motor City, to help people like Bunyan. His story is grew up in Detroit. Both of his parents died at a young age, and then he finds Jesus, and he hasn't felt like he's had a home. And now he feels like he has a home church, he has a family. And I just want to say thank you for your generosity, because now a church like this exists. And so we have people that are starting to see, that are starting to wake up to the signs of how much Jesus loves them and wants a real relationship with them. The need is so great for church planting. And when we think of missions, I know a lot of times we can think on the other side of the world, which is still so important, but there is such a need right here in Detroit, and right now.
Such a need right here and right now for missions and mission work. And so every penny that we give to Annie Armstrong goes directly and totally to the mission field. These and many, many other missionaries use that. Tonight, I'm just going to continue. It seems like we got something started and just kind of hard to cut it off in the middle, so we'll just keep going in Daniel for a little while longer. I'm going to be in Daniel chapter 8 tonight. Now, I was reading this from a Bible study site called Bible.org. It says, Daniel chapter 8 is a preacher's nightmare. Even noted scholars hesitate to be dogmatic in their interpretation of this chapter. Daniel himself has not the foggiest notion of the vision's meaning, even after the angel Gabriel interpreted the vision for him. This in spite of the fact that Daniel had a reputation of being able to understand and interpret all kinds of visions and dreams. You know, that's really a pretty interesting statement when you think about how he was so noted and rose to such a place of prominence, being able to tell people what their dreams were and what the interpretation is. As we look back, the two visions of Nebuchadnezzar, and yet this vision that he receives in chapter 8 leaves him exhausted and physically ill. He simply cannot grasp its meaning. In the last verse of the chapter, it says that I, Daniel, was exhausted and sick for days. And I got up again and carried on the king's business, but I was astounded at the vision, and there was none to explain it. And a lot of things have been written, and a lot of things have been said about chapter 8. You can research it. You can Google it. You can Google the 14th verse, and you're going to come up with all kinds of things that'll spin you in circles. There is something to the effect that chapter 7 and chapter 8 have a similar pattern, and we might see something there, and we can make some notations about that, and a few things that we do understand, mostly from the angel Gabriel, and we'll see how that breaks down, and we can talk about what we do know, and we can maybe take a stab at a few things that it may be pertaining to. But if Daniel couldn't figure it out, I don't know that we're going to get everything down pat in one evening. So in chapter 7, we're told that it was recorded in Aramaic. Chapter 8 is recorded in Hebrew, for whatever difference that makes. In chapter 7, we noted that we went backwards into Belshazzar's reign. You know, we had looked at Nebuchadnezzar, and then Belshazzar, and then Belshazzar, the handwriting on the wall, and his kingdom was taken away from him. And the Medes and the Persians came in, Darius, and we looked at him. But then in chapter 7, there's a little bit of a flashback here. So we go back in time just a little bit as Daniel's telling us about these things. in chapter 7. So it's been suggested these two chapters are written about 10, 12 years before the end of Belshazzar's reign, which also is the end of the Babylonian kingdom. The handwriting on the wall and all that. So Daniel finds himself in the midst of this. And this is what he says in verse 1. It says, "In the 3rd year of King Belshazzar's reign, I, Daniel, had a vision after the one that had already appeared to me. In my vision, I saw myself in the citadel of Susa, in the province of Elam. In the vision, I was beside the Ulai Canal. I looked up, and there was a ram with 2 horns standing beside the canal, and the horns were long. One of the horns was longer than the other, but grew up later. I watched the ram as he charged toward the south. No animal could stand against him, and none could rescue from his power. He did as he pleased, and became great. As I was thinking about this, suddenly a goat with a prominent horn between his eyes came from the west, crossing the whole earth without touching the ground. He came toward the 2-horned ram I had seen standing beside the canal and charged at him in great rage. I saw him attack the ram furiously, striking the ram and shattering his horns. The ram was powerless to stand against him. The goat knocked him to the ground and trampled on him, and none could rescue the ram from his power. The goat became very great, but at the height of his power, his large horn was broken off, and in its place, 4 prominent horns grew up toward the 4 winds of heaven. Out of one of them came another horn, which started small, but grew in power to the south and to the east and toward the beautiful land. It grew until it reached the host of the heavens, and it threw some of the starry host down to the earth and trampled on them. It set itself up to be as great as the prince of the host. It took away the daily sacrifice from him, and the place of the sanctuary was brought low. Because of rebellion, the host of the saints and the daily sacrifice were given over to it. It prospered in everything it did, and truth was thrown to the ground. Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to him, "How long will it take for the vision to be fulfilled? The vision concerning the daily sacrifice, the rebellion that causes desolation, and the surrender of the sanctuary and of the host that will be trampled underfoot." He said to me, "It will take 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the sanctuary will be reconsecrated." While I, Daniel, was watching the vision and trying to understand it, there before me stood one that looked like a man. And I heard a man's voice from the Ulai calling, "Gabriel, tell this man the meaning of the vision." And as he came near the place where I was standing, I was terrified and fell prostrate. "So, son of man," he said to me, "understand that the vision concerns the time of the end." While he was speaking to me, I was in a deep sleep with my face to the ground. Then he touched me and raised me to my feet. "I'm going to tell you what will happen later in the time of wrath, because the vision concerns the appointed time of the end. The 2-horned ram that you saw represents the kings of Media and Persia. The shaggy goat is the king of Greece, and the large horn between his eyes is the first king. The 4 horns that replace the one that was broken off represent 4 kingdoms that will emerge from his nation, but will not have the same power. In the latter part of their reign, when rebels have become completely wicked, a stern-faced king, a master of intrigue, will arise. He will become very strong, but not by his own power. He will cause astounding devastation, and he will succeed in whatever he does. He will destroy the mighty men and the holy people. He will cause deceit to prosper and consider himself superior. When they feel secure, he will destroy many and take his stand against the Prince of Princes. Yet he will be destroyed, but not by human power. The vision of the evenings and mornings that have been given you is true, but seal it up but seal up rather the vision, for it concerns the distant future. I, Daniel, was exhausted and lay ill for several days. Then I got up and went about the king's business. I was appalled by the vision. It was beyond understanding. Well, it's beyond understanding, but we can go back and we can make heads or tails of at least a few pieces of it. In the 7th chapter, there was once again a dream, and there were 4 parts to the dream, just as there were 4 parts to Nebuchadnezzar's dream. You remember that Nebuchadnezzar had the dream, and there was the tall being, and it was made out of the 4 different metals: gold, silver, bronze, and iron. And we understood that the gold represented the kingdom at the time of Nebuchadnezzar. And so, he liked that. He thought that was pretty good. And then that would be replaced by the next kingdom, which would be the Medes and the Persians, which would be replaced by the next kingdom, which would be the Greeks, which would be replaced by eventually the Romans. In Daniel chapter 7, we see something very similar to that, and it focuses on a little horn that comes out of the 4th kingdom. But in Daniel chapter 8, we see something come out of the 3rd kingdom. So there's a different focus here. We're going to come back to some of the other topics, but Daniel chapter 8 seems to deal with something that's going to happen before the Roman times. Persia was made up of 2 peoples, the Medes and the Persians. And so in the first part of Daniel's vision, he sees, he says, I looked up before me, there was a ram with 2 horns. Okay, one longer than the other. The Medes and the Persians, the other one grew. And so the Medes and the Persians, or the Medo-Persian kingdom, is what would exist immediately after Belshazzar is killed and his kingdom is taken away from him. So Daniel finds himself in the future standing in the capital of Persia, the city of Susa, about 150 miles above the Persian Gulf, something like that. And he has this vision. This kingdom gets to run rampant on the world stage for a while, and certainly they did. You know this from biblical accounts, and also we get a little bit of insight from some historical pictures. When this kingdom, however, has served its purpose, and a key part of that purpose is the return from exile. Babylon conquered what was left of the Jewish people and brought them into captivity, 70 years, and then it'll be Cyrus, Persian, that will begin to let them go back and return. But after they have fulfilled their purpose on the world stage, and that was a major part of that, another kingdom is going to take over. He says, as I was thinking about this, verse 5, a goat with a prominent horn between his eyes came from the west. And Gabriel will confirm this for us, verses 20, 21. This is Greece, okay? Historically, what happens is, at the time, a man by the name of Alexander the Great became the king or leader of the Greek nation, and in a very short period of time, conquered for himself a kingdom that stretched from Italy to India. And it's a pretty good stretch of territory, and he did so very quickly because he died at age 33. So you figure how many ever adult years he had, and he was this conquering general, king, hero type person to the Greeks. The Bible says, I was thinking about this, a goat with a prominent horn between his eyes came from the west, and certainly that's Greece was to the west of this, and crossing the whole earth without touching the ground. He came toward the 2-horned ram, that's the Persians, and defeats them. I saw him attack fiercely, striking the ram and shattering his 2 horns. The ram was powerless to stand against him. None could rescue the ram from his power. The goat became very great. Okay. But he also, Alexander the Great did, he magnified himself like Belshazzar. There's a lot in common with their leadership and their character and view of themselves. And it says, while, just lost the verse here. He said, verse 8, the goat became very great, but at the height of his power, his large horn was broken off. And by the way, horns often refer to the symbols of royalty or leadership or strength. So they're talking about they all represent kingdoms or at least the leaders of those kingdoms. He magnified himself, his horns broken off, and 4 smaller grew up to take his place. 4 prominent horns grew up towards 4 winds of heaven. Now, historically, when Alexander died, I think I said it incorrectly the last time. It did not go to his sons. He had 2 sons. They were murdered. His kingdom went to 4 of his generals. Okay. If I said sons before, apologize. It was 4 of his generals. But it was divided up into 4 parts, nonetheless. And each of them had a region that they were able to control. And we're told here that out of them came another horn, which started small, but grew in power towards the south and the east and towards the beautiful land, which is a reference to Israel. So it seems to understand that a king will arise out of this latter part of the kingdom of Greece. And again, the little horn and the emphasis from here to the end of the vision, verse 14, concentrates on this 3rd kingdom or this 3rd period, not the 4th kingdom, as some of as chapter 7 and some other things we've seen in Daniel have. Although there is this consistency, which I don't think I'd ever paid enough attention to in the past, that Nebuchadnezzar's dream and the different visions that Daniel sees, that there's a consistency here to them that may help us understand it a little bit better, although it takes a lot of wading through this animal or that beast or which one's the first, second, or third, fourth. So it just helps me to think of it in terms of chronological, what happens first, second, and third. But there's one that's going to come up out of this Greek kingdom who's going to start off small, and he's going to gain more and more power, and he's going to rebel against God. He's going to oppose and oppress the saints, and particularly to persecute people in Israel at this time. He's going to succeed for a limited period of time, and that there's a time of tribulation that's going to mark the end of the age and precede the first coming of Christ. Now, stay with me again. I'm trying to do this chronologically. And this leader is widely believed to be a man by the name of Antiochus Epiphanes IV. Now, his name was Antiochus. He gave himself the title Epiphanes, which can be translated a couple different ways. One is the bright one. He thought a lot of himself. The other is kind of like a god. All right, so a lot of these folks, Greek and Romans, they kind of thought, the gods up there kind of came down and, might even be among us or this kind of thing. So he thought himself to be one of these. And he was a very serious ruler, and we know a lot about him from history, including the history that was written by the Maccabees. At the end of this time, he's going to do what he does. I'm going to come back to that because that's where Daniel really seems to be focused. We also see a lot of similarities between this and other prophecy about the end of the age before the second coming of Christ. And so I'd suggest that this serves as a prototype for another who's going to be raised up in the end times. And it won't be Antiochus, but it'll be the Antichrist. And there are a lot of similarities. You can just kind of go down through the list of how they're going to start off with a little bit of power and they're going to gain to be great power, how they're going to oppress and persecute God's people, how they're going to be manipulative, how they're going to be men of intrigue, how they're going to be, verse 23 here says, a stern-faced king, this iron-fisted kind of ruler, or that image of that. And as bad as Antiochus Epiphanes was, the Antichrist is going to be much worse. And some of the things he's going to do are going to parallel this as well. And this seems to be the way that Jesus interpreted the prophecy. In Matthew 24, he says, well, you know, when you see this time of desolation come, or the rebellion that causes desolation, well, he's referring back to Daniel. In fact, he says in Daniel's day, the original, or what the Jews would have considered the time of desolation, took place in 167 BC. Jesus is saying it's going to happen again, and that will be our clue of what's, you know, taking place, or at least those who are remaining on earth at the time will see some of the stuff the Antichrist is going to do, is going to parallel this. And Gabriel, well, let's see, he comes into, and if you don't know what I just referred to, this rebellion that causes desolation, in about 170 BC, Antiochus Epiphanes has taken over Israel. He is going to try to destroy the Israelites and force them to become Greek. Hellenistic is another term meaning force people to become, or meaning the Greek ways and the Greek lifestyle. So he's going to force them to do this. He builds some structures, which archaeologists have uncovered, things that were designed to motivate people to think Greek, become Greek. And one of the things that he does in 170 is he stops, or he starts to oppose the priesthood, and he stops the daily sacrifice. And then in 167 BC, he decides that he's going to make his own sacrifice at the temple, and he walks in and he sacrifices a pig on the altar. Okay, which obviously, you know, it's an unclean animal and had no place under the way that God had described the temple was to be carried out. Certainly, Antiochus was not a priestly character, had no business being there doing that, and it was this desolation. Well, there was a priest by the name of Judas Maccabeus who said, we aren't going to take it anymore. And he raised up an army, and they defeated the Greeks. And the temple was cleansed in 164 BC. Okay. So what we have here is the rebellion, the host of the saints, the daily sacrifice were given over to it, meaning this little horn, and it prospered in everything it did, and the truth was thrown to the ground. Okay, so that was verse 12. How long will it take for the vision to be fulfilled? The vision concerning the daily sacrifice, the rebellion that causes desolation, and the surrender of the sanctuary, and the host that will be trampled underfoot. In verse 14, he said to me, it will take 2,300 evenings and mornings. Then the sanctuary will be reconsecrated. Okay. 2,300 evenings and mornings. Well, 2,300 days is one way that people have interpreted this. That's a little over 6 years. They used a lunar calendar then that's 360 days long. We follow a solar calendar that's 365 and a quarter days long, but they followed a lunar calendar. And so it's just over 6 years, or 170 to 164 BC, 6 years, 171 or late 170. Okay, so about 6 years. Well, that was from the time the sacrifices stopped until the temple was reconsecrated. Now, some people have gone in and said, well, but it talks about evenings and mornings. Well, there was an evening sacrifice and there was a morning sacrifice. So if it's 2,300 sacrifices, not 2,300 days, but 2,300 sacrifices, that's 1,150 or just over 3 years. Well, that's the time from Antiochus slaughtering the pig until the temple is reconstituted. So either way, it kind of works. But as you can imagine, when you get a hold of numbers and people who think themselves to be good at prophecy, you get all kinds of things. Those who interpret it to be 2,300 years, it comes out to 1844. And the Seventh-day Adventists are ones that take it to be that, and something they think happened in 1844. Well, I don't know that much on God's calendar did, but anyhow, just to show you what can happen with that. So we see all that. Well, there's Daniel. He's watched this vision, and then there's someone like a man who's standing there, and he talks to him, and we find out this to be the angel Gabriel, and he confirms very clearly. Now, this is years before it happens. 10, 12 years before the Medes and the Persians come in and overtake Babylon. And he's told specifically, verse 20, the two-horned ram that you saw represents the kings of Media and Persia. The shaggy goat is the king of Greece. The four horns replace the one that was broken off, represent 4 kingdoms that emerge from the nation, but will not have the same power. In the latter part of their reign, when the rebels have become completely wicked, a stern-faced king, a master of intrigue, will arise. He will become very strong. Not by his own power. It'll be satanic power. He will cause astounding devastation and will succeed in whatever he does. He will destroy the mighty men and the holy people. He will cause deceit to prosper, and he will consider himself superior. And when they feel secure, he will destroy many and take his stand against the prince of princes. Yet he will be destroyed, but not by human power. No, it will be God who will cast him down. The vision of the evenings, the mornings that's been given is true, but seal up the vision, for it concerns the distant future. So not only could he not understand it, but he was supposed to seal it up, record it, but seal it up for some future generation to look at it. So again, years, many years, centuries, a few centuries even before some of these events take place, he is given this insight to write down, and even though he didn't fully understand it, he does so. Once again, I just can't help but think that there's a pattern here, a prototype exists here of what's going to take place at the end. That there will be one who will be raised up, who is going to desecrate, who is going to be a master of intrigue and a deceiver, who's going to bring devastation, who will appear to prosper, but it's not going to be by human skill or ability that's going to cause him to prosper, but a satanic one. And yet he will be destroyed, not by human power, but by Jesus. And it's about all I want to get into tonight. We're going to get into, or come back to some of this through chapter 9 through 11. So we'll see what else we can find out about this particular vision that led Daniel to have so many troubles and to be so ill at what he saw. Any other thought or comment or question? Because it's like, you read that, all those vision type language, it gets a little.
I'm puzzled by sealing up the vision, and yet we're reading about it.
Right, it doesn't say for how long
It's
to be
just
sealed.
sealed up to the end of time. One part of it, like in the last of the 9th chapter.
Okay.
Seal these things up, Daniel. Don't worry about it, because for the end time, it'll be revealed.
Okay.
I think it's at the end of the 9th chapter.
No, still puzzled.
I remember reading it, I can't remember where it's at.
So it would apply to me that there's perhaps, if that's the case, that there's perhaps more that Daniel was told that is a part of what is sealed up. And yet some of this was not intended to be sealed up for the end of time, because as you say, here it is. We're reading. At least just maybe the fact of what he saw.
Hey guys, it's me, Tammy.
That's my Bible.
Okay.
So, trying to do a search.
Yeah, and searches are good. You're going to find a lot of ink has been spilled over these chapters. There's so much here to try to wade through, and what does it refer to and when. If it were not for Gabriel, I mean, it'd be so easy to take these times and say, well, no, this is all future for us. Clearly, at least part of it. It's come and gone, but it builds towards something. Any others?
That's at the end of the 12th chapter.
Okay.
And go that way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed up to the end, time of the end. And they shall be purified and made white and tried. But the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand. But the wise shall understand. That probably is a relief to Daniel. Maybe that's where he got over his sickness.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it, Danny. I'm gonna take care of it.
True enough. Yeah.
No wonder he got a headache, whatever that. All that thrown on him.
Yeah, can you imagine, and depending on how, was this like in HD clarity of all the suffering, all the problems, everything people have to endure, what was going to happen? That would be a heavy load.
What a pretty picture he got painted.
No,
Isn't it?
all right. Well, we'll return to Daniel then in a couple weeks. Next week we have the dinner, so we'll pray about that. Other prayer requests, certainly our missions and mission.